I'm so angry with her that I'm ready to kill her. I growled angrily, taking another sip of beer. Hey Johnny, don't even say those things, Billy said, which was kind of funny because Billy had a hotter temp than I did. In high school, he constantly got into fights, and the slightest thing could set him off. But she's cheating on me, I whined. Looks like she's been fucking her doctor friend for a couple of months now. How could she do this to me? Billy ordered us another glass and, when we sat down at the table, asked me to tell him what happened. I didn't really want to go into details, but still, oddly enough, I felt drawn to talk about it. Something like a conversation about a previous operation. So I started from the beginning. I always thought Doris and I had a very good marriage. Of course, we fought from time to time about things. What couple doesn't? But then we always kissed and made up, and that's all that mattered. In terms of money, we had a pretty good life together. I dropped out of college my sophomore year. This academic stuff just wasn't for me. But I didn't really need a degree because I am, as they say, a born salesman. I eventually got a job at one of the 2 largest car dealerships in the city and soon began making good money. So Doris and I got engaged when she was a freshman and married when she was a senior. The funny thing is that Doris also went into sales. After graduating from university, she went to work for one of the large pharmaceutical companies. This basically meant that she sold prescription drugs. Anyway, we weren't rich or anything, but we were doing well. No children yet, but it will come. At least that's what I thought. The first thing that attracted me to Doris was her figure. When I first met her, she was slim and fit. What's even better is that even after 6 years of marriage, she remained that way. Some of it was good genes, I think, but she also became obsessed with working out. She goes to the gym 3, 4, even 5 days a week. The good news is that her body was tight and sexy, not like that pumped-up bodybuilder that makes me sick, but more like that Jillian Michaels woman you see on TV all the time. I really liked it. But the bad news was that all this exercise seemed to really wear her out. Lately, when I wanted to enjoy that hot body in bed, all she wanted to do was sleep. But as I just found out, there was another reason why she didn't want to do the horizontal mambo with me. That reason was Morris Fisher, one of the doctors she saw regularly. I accidentally stumbled upon an affair between my wife and the good doctor. Even though she is the smartest in our family, Doris is the type of person who always forgets things. I can't even count the number of times we had to look for her lost cell phone or go back somewhere to pick up a purse that had been left behind. So it wasn't unusual that she left her laptop at home when she left for work this morning. But what was a surprise was the letter that I found in my mailbox entitled, "It was so hot yesterday." Of course, I opened it right away. In short, it became apparent that he and Dr. Fisher had been using email to arrange meetings at the motel for months. From the contents of the other letters I read, it was quite obvious that they were not meeting to compare the relative merits of different drugs. When I dug through her email and saw what she was saying to him, it also became clear that this was much more than just a casual hookup. They were both in the midst of a full-blown affair. I didn't expect this, I moaned pitifully to Billy. What should I do, Guy? Well, if it were my wife, I'd give her a fist sandwich right before I tossed her to the curb, Billy said smugly. No, I could never hit Doris, I said. I'll just have to divorce her and live my own life. But I would really like to get back at Dr. Morris Fisher for ruining my marriage. While I was sitting and drinking, an idea came to my mind. I leaned across the table and quietly said to Billy, "Hey buddy, can you help me get a little revenge?" I think I know how we could make sure it doesn't affect us. Billy's eyes sparkled. "Tell me what you came up with," he said impatiently. My idea was simple. We'd use Doris' email to lure the good doctor back to the motel, only we'd be the one waiting, not her. We'll tie him up, take his clothes, and leave him there in his underwear. Then we'll call the TV news so they can film him when the police rescue him. This will show the world his true colors. But he'll find out we did it, Billy protested. I've thought of everything, I assured him. We will be wearing ski masks and surgical gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. Everything will be perfect. Okay, smart guy, but you're forgetting one thing, Billy said. If he receives a letter from your Doris, he will guess that it was you who sent it. Perhaps, I agreed. But even if so, it is unlikely that he will say anything. If he does that, he'll have to admit that he had an affair, and I'm willing to bet his wife won't be too happy about that. Billy looked at me shrewdly. Maybe you're right. Besides, he may suspect you, but he won't be able to prove anything. Especially if I delete the email from Doris's computer after I send it, I said triumphantly. Come on, Billy said. I hate fucking cheaters. That damn doc owes you for fucking your wife. Okay, here's how we'll do it. I'll email him from Doris's computer tonight and set up a meeting at their regular motel right after dinner. Tomorrow morning you will go and book a room. When he appears, we will capture him. And then we'll cut off his penis, right? Billy asked impatiently. No, I said hastily. We don't want to get caught. We will gag him, strip him, tie him to a chair, and leave him. I'll make an anonymous call to the police about a disturbance in the room, and you call your TV buddy and tell him the police are investigating something serious at the motel. It'll be all over the news. He'll be the laughingstock of the whole town. If he kept his mouth shut, he would still be very embarrassed because everyone would know that he was hiding in the hotel. And if he tells them why he went to the motel in the first place, everyone will know about his affair with Doris, and then I will throw her out. Sounds great, Billy said readily. Cannot wait. Just remember one thing, Billy, I added. When you rent this room, don't use your credit card. Why is this? I tried not to roll my eyes. Because you don't really want the police to find out who rented the room where the doctor was captured, I said impatiently. Well, yes, Billy said. I mentally shook my head. Billy was a great guy, but he won't win the Nobel Prize anytime soon. That evening, when I returned home, I acted as if nothing had happened. I even hinted to Doris that I would like to have some fun in bed after dinner, but she quickly rejected the idea, as I expected. I didn't know if Fisher had tired her, or if she was so fixated on him that she didn't want me to touch her. Either way, I'll give this one up, traitor, as soon as I take revenge on her lover. After she went to bed, I found her rolling suitcase, the same one she used to carry all her drug samples and doctor crap. Of course, the laptop was inside. When I ran it, I found that the email was password protected, but I expected that. Due to her forgetfulness, Doris kept the passwords written down on a piece of paper tucked into her wallet. I pulled out a piece of paper, typed in the password, and bingo. Has entered. I quickly started typing out my little invitation to the love doctor, and I was pretty sure I knew how to express it so that he couldn't resist. But halfway there, I stopped abruptly. We had a big problem. Billy was going to get a motel room tomorrow, but I needed to know right now which number to give the good doctor. Keep it up, dumbass! I cursed myself. And you won't win the Nobel Prize this year either. I quickly called Billy. When he answered the phone, I asked, "Can you talk?" "Of course I can," he replied. "Can't you hear me?" No, I almost shouted. "I mean, can you talk without Phyllis hearing you?" "Oh," he said. "She's not here, speak up." When I explained my dilemma, Billy said, "Just make an anonymous call to the doctor tomorrow and tell him the room number." "Yes, that will work," I said sarcastically. "Don't you think that he might suspect something was wrong if some man called him and told him where to meet my wife to do sex?" "Well, yes," Billy said, and I suppressed a groan, and then it dawned on me. "I understand," I said impatiently. "When you go to the motel tomorrow, rent a room for 2 days. Then I will write to the doctor tomorrow evening about the appointment for the next day and which room to go to." "Okay, but what will we do with the room tomorrow?" "We won't do anything," I said, trying to contain my irritation. "Well, I think it's a waste of time," Billy said. "Besides, I don't think my credit card can afford 2 days." "No credit cards, Billy." I screamed and then covered my mouth with my hand because I didn't want to wake Doris. "Listen, Billy, if you don't have enough money, I'll give it to you, but only in cash, not with a credit card. Don't forget, pay in cash." He agreed, but I had a bad feeling. However, Billy did what I told him and called me back the next day with the room number. "It's not a problem, Johnny. The receptionist didn't even look at me and I paid in cash as we agreed. And here's the thing, we have room 101. It's at the very end, so it should be very quiet." "Sounds great, buddy. Well done. I will send this letter tonight and you take what you agreed on." "What else, Johnny?" I let out a deep sigh, but managed to maintain my composure. "Duct tape and your camera," I reminded him. "I'll bring surgical gloves and ski masks for us." "Oh yes," he said. After hanging up the phone, I cursed quietly. If he says, "Oh yeah," one more time, I swear I'll scream. Doris went to bed early again, so I had no problem texting Dr. Fisher. In the letter, I promised him hot sex, like he had never had before. If only he would show up in room 101 at the motel tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. "I'm going to sweep you off your feet," I wrote, and this phrase made me laugh all night. When the big day arrived, everything no longer seemed so funny to me. I started wondering if I was going to do something really stupid. But when I remembered all those love letters between two traitors, my anger flared up again. Dr. Fisher deserved all the humiliation he was about to suffer, and so did Doris, for that matter. I was a faithful husband who was wronged. They deserved what was coming to them. Around noon, I called Billy on his cell phone to make sure everything was ready. He was supposed to come to the dealership at 12:30 and pretend to be a customer so I could take him for a test drive. This was our legend, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay. "Where are you, Billy? Are you home?" "No, I spent the night in a motel room," he answered nonchalantly. "What?" I shouted. "Why did you do that?" "Well, I thought it would be a shame to leave it empty. Besides, Phyllis and I had a fight and I needed to get out of the house." Again, all I could do was shake my head. Billy's wife was a pretty little nurse who worked at the hospital. Doris knew her because they both worked out at the same gym. As far as I could tell, Phyllis seemed like a good woman, but she and Billy were always fighting about something. However, I didn't like the idea of him leaving all the evidence in the motel room. I watched the forensics and knew what they might find. "Billy," I said sternly, "I thought we agreed that we didn't want to leave any traces in the room." "Well, yes," Billy said, and I bit my tongue to keep from screaming. "Listen, Billy, clean up your mess, wipe everything you touched, and then go to the car dealership. Remember, you must be here exactly at 12:30. Despite my concerns, Billy arrived at the showroom promptly at 12:30. I signed up for a demo and we rushed to the motel. When we got there, I handed Billy a pair of surgical gloves and pulled on mine. Then we entered the room. It was a mess, as I expected. At first, I was afraid that Fisher might show up early, but when has the doctor ever shown up on time? Be that as it may, working together, we tried to put everything in order before he arrived. Billy and I closed all the blinds and curtains in the room, and then I turned off all the lamps. The last thing I did was adjust the small latch to keep the door slightly open. We then pulled on our ski masks and retreated around the corner. It was very dark except for the light leaking from under the door. As we waited in silence, Billy surprised me when he leaned over and whispered in my ear, "It's really creepy here." It took all my strength not to choke him. "Quiet, Billy," I hissed. "He could be outside right now." "Oh, well, yes." Before I could answer, we heard footsteps in the hallway. I shushed Billy and pointed at the camera in his hand. He nodded, and I hoped that meant he remembered what he was supposed to do. I peeked around the corner. At that moment, the door opened, and a man entered the room. "Hey, Doris, where are you, sexy lady?" he called playfully. I nudged Billy to get ready. "I'm here," I said in a whisper. And when he turned in our direction, Billy turned on the camera. The flash hit the doctor square in the face, and he screamed as the bright light blinded him. I waited until he stopped rubbing his eyes, and when he lowered his hands, I hit him. I'm a pretty big guy, and I've been in fights, so I knew how to handle myself. I must have added a little extra to this blow because the doc fell like a stone onto the carpet. I started dancing, swinging my aching fist. "It hurts like hell," I moaned. Luckily, Billy was all business. He made sure the room door was closed and locked, then returned and checked on his lover. He whistled. "You really nailed it, Johnny," he said admiringly. He turned off like a light. "Quiet," I hissed, "and don't call me by name." "Sorry, Johnny." "Come on," I commanded. "Help me take off his clothes." We took off our ski masks and tried to undress the doctor. You'd be surprised how difficult it is to undress a limp body. But after much tugging, we stripped the doctor down to his blue striped boxers. Neither of us wanted to touch his private parts, so we stopped. Then we sat him on a chair and taped him down. Even though he seemed to be unconscious, I didn't want to risk him waking up and screaming, so I also taped his mouth. "Okay," I said, "we're done. Let's throw his clothes in the trash can in the parking lot and then head back to the dealership." "Are you sure you don't want to cut that bastard's dick off?" Billy asked, pulling out a sinister-looking folding knife from his pocket. "Put it away, Billy," I said hastily. "We already talked about this. All we want is to humiliate him, not maim him." "Okay," Billy said, and, to my relief, he put the knife away. We gathered the rest of the doctor's clothes and headed for the door. When we left, I used the metal latch to keep the door from closing. "Why did you do that?" Billy asked. "So that the police and reporters can easily enter the room," I told him. "Well, yes," Billy said. I sighed nervously, and we headed to the back door of the motel. On the way back to the dealership, I threw the doctor's clothes, gloves, and ski masks into the trash. When we returned, Billy climbed into his pickup truck to leave. I leaned over to him to make sure he remembered what to do next. "I'm going to make an anonymous call to 911 to report a disturbance at the motel. As soon as you get home, call your TV buddy. Tell him you just saw the police pull up to the motel and it looked like something serious had happened." He nodded, and I could only hope that he understood everything correctly. The test drive I took with Billy lasted a little longer than usual, but no one said anything about it. I mentally breathed a sigh of relief. Looks like we got away with it. The rest of the day seemed to drag on forever, but finally the day was over and I hopped in the car to head to the bar to meet Billy. I was so excited that I almost felt high. The thought of seeing the good doc being led out of a dingy motel in his underpants on the 10 o'clock news almost made my mouth water. It would be even better to see Doris's face as she watches it with me. Billy, of course, was already sitting at the table and waiting for me with a beer. "Well?" I asked impatiently. "Did you call your friend, as we agreed?" "Yeah," he said, and took a long sip from the bottle. "Did the reporters film the doctor leaving the motel?" "Certainly." "Well, what did your friend say? What did Fisher look like?" Billy just shook his head. "It's hard to say in a body bag." "Body bag? What body bag?" "The body bag in which the doctor lay." I stared at him in horror. "He was dead, Johnny," Billy said. "He had to be carried out in a bag." "How is this possible, Billy? When we left, he was fine, except for a bruise on his jaw." "Someone must have come into the room after we left and finished him off, Johnny." When my friend called me back to thank me for the tip, he said that the maid had found the doctor with his throat cut. This will be the top story on today's news. To this day, the only time in my life I've ever felt woozy was when I licked really hard while playing football in high school. But then I felt like I was going to faint. The worst thing that could ever happen. I took a long sip of beer to calm myself down and stared at Billy. "Do the police know who did this?" "Nope," Billy answered calmly. "My friend said that no one saw or heard anything." "Listen, Billy, this is bad. Very bad. We could be in real trouble." "Why?" he asked. "We didn't kill him. You and I know this, but the police don't know this," I said irritably. "If they find out that we tied him up, they'll probably try to pin the murder on us." "Oh, well, yes." I wanted to lean across the table and strangle him, but I knew now was not the time to lose control. "Look, Billy, we have to keep this a secret. You won't tell anyone. Not Phyllis, not your TV news buddy, not anyone. If you spill the beans, we could end up in jail, you know?" "Of course, Johnny, of course." "I really hope that the police will immediately find whoever killed him. As soon as they make an arrest, we will be out of danger." "Don't worry, Johnny, I'll keep my mouth shut," he said, doing that stupid hand and mouth gesture we learned in 5th grade. I thought I was going to throw up. When I went home, I could only pray that Billy would remain silent, but I doubted that he would be able to hold out much longer. I was sure that if the cops ever took him in for questioning, we were doomed. Why the hell was I trying to get revenge on that bastard doctor? Why didn't I just file for divorce from Doris and leave it at that? Doris! Heck, I was planning on meeting her tonight about her cheating. Well, now I'll have to leave it. I just have to go home and act fat, dumb, and happy around her. How painful it is. I hoped I could fake it well enough to fool her. When I returned home, everything turned out to be even worse than I expected. Before I could enter, Doris ran up to me and burst into tears. "What's the matter, honey? What's happened?" "Oh, Johnny," she sobbed. "This is so terrible." This dear Dr. Fisher, to whom I always turned, was killed. It's all over the news. "I can't believe this," I said, trying to sound shocked and sympathetic. "What's happened?" "His body was found in the motel room," she moaned. "His throat was cut. I know I shouldn't have said this, but I couldn't resist. They found him in the motel room? It looked like he was going to meet someone for a little afternoon fun." "You do not know him," she snapped. "Be that as it may, at a time like now, you need to throw away bad thoughts." "Sorry, dear. I didn't mean to take such a terrible tragedy lightly," I said remorsefully. In fact, it annoyed me that I had to speak well of him. I didn't want to kill him, but it didn't bother me too much. But what really rubbed salt into my wounds was that I knew the real reason why Doris was so upset. This went on all evening. Every time she entered the room, Doris's eyes were full of tears. When we watched the news, she hid her face in a handkerchief. It was sickening, especially when the TV reporter started talking about what a terrible loss his death was to society. It shouldn't be like this, I thought. They should be talking about what a vile traitor he was, and not praising him to the skies. This is simply unfair. Doris went to bed without even having dinner, so I had to make myself a sandwich so I wouldn't starve. But to tell the truth, I wasn't that hungry myself. In addition to the stress of having to pretend to be a caring husband around Doris, I was terribly worried about what might happen next. Billy and I tried to be careful, but what if we left some evidence behind? What will I tell the police if they come after me? Who would believe that we tied up Fisher but didn't hurt him, other than that light blow to the jaw? After a sleepless night, I went to work the next day, but things weren't any easier there either. Dr. Fisher had bought cars from us before, and his murder was the main topic of conversation. Everyone had their own theory about who did it and why. I thought about coming up with some alternative theory in hopes of confusing people, but for the life of me, I couldn't come up with anything. In the end, I decided to remain silent in the hope that all this would pass quickly. When I met Billy at the bar that evening, it was obvious that he was eager to see me. "You'll never guess that I found out about the doctor's murder," he greeted me loudly when I approached the table. "Shut up, Billy," I hissed. "I think we won't talk about this with anyone." "Of course, but you have to hear it. My friend found out something that the police had never told anyone before. Despite my nervousness, I couldn't help but be curious." "Well, what's the matter?" He leaned across the table towards me. "When the police found his body, the killer carved the word slut into his chest. They believe it was a revenge killing." Wow, that was a shock. I sat back in my chair and tried to think through the consequences. That's not all. The cops are pretty sure the killer is a man. They don't think a woman would be strong enough to knock him out, strip him, and put him in a chair. They figure it would take a pretty big guy to do all this. This latest news made me dizzy. Oh God, Billy, now I'm in. If they ever link us to this case, I will most likely end up in the electric chair. "But you didn't kill," Billy protested. "Yes, but how can I prove it? I had a motive, I fit the description, and I had an opportunity. All they're missing is the murder weapon." "I watch true crime shows on TV," Billy said. "You probably threw away the murder weapon." "Billy, this won't help me. I didn't kill, did I?" "Oh, well, yes. If I was scared last night, today was even worse. Hell, if I looked at all the evidence, even I myself would think I was guilty. The only positive thing was that I had the day off tomorrow and didn't have to listen to all this endless murder speculation. but it didn't help me fall asleep easily. The next day, Doris went to the gym, probably to try to get rid of her sadness through exercise. I decided to try to take my mind off my worries for a while by doing some yard work. It was a beautiful day, and the lawn definitely needed mowing, so I stripped down to my old shorts and got to work in the yard. While I was cutting the grass, a car stopped in front of our house, and an attractive young woman got out. She moved towards me, and I quickly turned off the lawnmower engine. "Is your wife at home?" she asked, looking at me carefully. "No, sorry," I told her with a smile. "You just missed each other." "I'm her husband, Johnny. I am alone." She reached into her purse and pulled out a card. "I'm Detective Monica Ferguson. Could you ask her to call me when she gets back? I'd like to ask her a few questions about Dr. Morris Fisher." I trembled with fear. "Why do you want to talk to your wife about him?" I asked, too hastily. The detective smiled and patted my hand. "Don't worry," she said. "We're just trying to talk to everyone who had contact with Dr. Fisher. His office staff told us that your wife is a pharmaceutical company representative and visited him regularly." "Oh yes," I said. "Damn," I thought. "That sounds as stupid as Billy said." As I mentally berated myself, she continued to look at me appraisingly, and I wondered if she was flirting with me or assessing my criminal potential. Finally, she asked, "Did you know Dr. Fisher?" "Of course I knew him," I said, and immediately realized what I had said. I mean, I knew about him through Doris, but I never met him. She looked at me a little longer and then said, "Don't forget to ask your wife to call me." Then, just about to leave, she paused and added, "See ya." I looked at her as she walked away. Why the hell did I say I knew Fisher? I asked myself. I wonder if that sounded suspicious. And what did she mean by "see you"? Needless to say, the peace and tranquility I achieved working in the yard is long gone. That evening, the local evening news featured an interview with the police chief about Fisher's murder. "We have discovered important new evidence and hope to make an arrest soon," he said pompously. My blood pressure was trying to climb Everest. I couldn't wait to meet Billy and see if his friend knew anything about this. Even before we sat down at the table, I began bombarding my friend with questions. "The boss is bluffing," Billy said decisively. "My friend says they have nothing new. They're just hoping to get someone out of hiding. But the guys from the crime branch had enough time to comb through the motel room with a fine-toothed comb. Maybe they discovered something. My friend says that so many guests stayed in this room, and it was cleaned so often that they didn't find anything useful," Billy said. Then a worried expression appeared on his face. "You look bad, Johnny. You need to calm down a little. Don't let this thing get to you." "It's easy for you to say," I snapped. "A police detective didn't come to your house yesterday." "Was it a woman named Monica?" he asked. When I nodded in surprise, he continued, "Yes, the same one was in the hospital. She even talked to Phyllis. They have nothing. They are just grasping at straws." As I left the bar, I kept thinking about what Billy said. How could he be so calm when I was going crazy with worry? How could he be so sure that his friend really knew the whole story? I eventually came to the conclusion that Billy's optimism was the direct opposite of his IQ. And since I snuck a peek into his IQ file before he was expelled from school, the thought scared the crap out of me. After another sleepless night and several handfuls of antacids, I knew I had to do something. There's no way I'm going to hold out until the police catch the killer, especially since the one they're most likely to catch is me. My only hope of saving my neck is to try to find the real killer myself. The only problem with this plan was that I had no idea how to handle a murder investigation. Sure, it looked easy on TV, but how would I do it in real life? Think, I convinced myself. Okay, I have to assume whoever killed the doctor knew him. It seemed unlikely that a complete stranger would wander into a motel room and kill a doctor taped to a chair. What about that slut that was carved into Fisher's chest? If it's a random act, I'm willing to eat my hat. So the question was, who besides me wanted to kill Dr. Fisher? No, wait. I didn't want to kill the doctor, I just wanted to humiliate him. It was someone else who really wanted him dead, but who? Since I didn't know Fisher, I'll have to talk to someone who did to get the answer to this question, and the best source I could come up with was his wife. Perhaps she could guess who might have a grudge against her late husband. So now all I had to do was find a way to get her to talk to me. A complete stranger. I admit that what I did next was really stupid, but every minute I fell more and more into despair and could not think of anything else. So the next weekend I went to the store and bought myself a toy detective badge painted gold. It will never stand up to scrutiny. All I could hope for was a bluff. Plus, I saw someone do something similar in a movie that was based on a true story, so maybe it would work in my case. So I put on a suit and tie and drove to the home of the late Dr. Fisher. This was quite impressive, as one would expect from a successful doctor. I sat in the roundabout driveway for a minute, trying to work up the courage to go see the doctor's wife. I knew the chances of her talking to me were slim. The chances of learning anything important are even less, even if I managed to talk to her. But I also knew for sure that I didn't want to go to jail and become Bubba's boyfriend, so I finally went over and rang the doorbell. The woman who answered the door reminded me of cut flowers that had been sitting in a vase too long. The beauty was still there, but I saw that it was quickly disappearing. I also saw a glass of whiskey she was holding in her hand. This also did not improve her appearance. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Fisher. I'm a detective." I handed her the badge. "Another one?" She interrupted me. "Well, I hope you are a good policeman." What?" I asked. "Isn't that what you do? The woman I talked to the other day was definitely a bad cop, so I hope you're a good cop." Well," I stuttered. "Nothing," she said. "Come in," and motioned for me to enter. "Would you like to have some whiskey and soda with me?" she asked, leading me to her room. "No, thank you," I said. "I'm on duty." "Well, there's no point in wasting whiskey," she replied and began to mix herself some more. Judging by the unsteady gait, this was not the first dose of the day. When she returned and sat down, I opened the small notebook I had bought to look formal. "First of all, Mrs. Fisher, let me express my condolences on the tragic death of your husband." Yes, he is dead. Let's continue," she said impatiently. I was so surprised by her behavior that I couldn't help myself. "If you don't mind, Mrs. Fisher, you don't seem to mourn his death very deeply," I ventured. "Mourning? Damn, I'm celebrating," she muttered, taking another sip of whiskey. "My late husband cheated on me, detective. As far as I understand, he got what he deserved." I wondered if she knew about Doris, but I decided it wouldn't be very smart to ask. Still, I was curious about her attitude. "Well, if he cheated on you, why didn't you just divorce him?" "I couldn't afford it," she answered blithely. "I signed a marriage contract when we got married. During the divorce, I left with what I brought into this marriage. No, the truth is that someone killed the bastard, and it was the best thing that could have happened to me." I blinked in surprise. Wow, if anyone wanted to frame themselves for murder, it was her. But if she's done with her hubby, why would she say something like that, especially to a police officer? Maybe she drank more than I thought, or maybe she was innocent and extremely naive. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I decided to ask her about the other suspects. "Mrs. Fisher, do you know anyone who might have a motive for killing your husband?" I asked. "Oh, of course," she answered nonchalantly, "and more than one." "Really?" I asked in surprise. "Of course, it could have been any of the husbands of the wives he slept with," she said casually. "My late husband simply couldn't keep his pants buttoned. He cheated on me many times over the years. I wouldn't be surprised if a jealous husband decided to take revenge." She shook her head bitterly. "My Morris was a real slut," she said. I almost gasped out loud when she said that. The fact that she said the word slut did not seem like a coincidence to me. But while it was suspicious as hell, it still wasn't a confession. Plus, she just gave me a few other possible suspects to check out. This detective game became more and more difficult. "Do you know who his mistresses were?" I asked somewhat nervously, wondering if she would call Doris. "I have no idea," she replied. "After I caught him cheating for the first time, I didn't care. Damn, this lead is lost too." But weren't you afraid that he might fall in love with one of them and leave you? As I said, Morris simply could not be faithful to me or anyone else. But I always knew that he would stay with me because he liked the image of a happy married man that he created in society. I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. What a lousy marriage. What about illness? Weren't you afraid that he would get an infection or something like that? She grinned. He was a doctor. Even if he got something, he knew how to cure it. Besides, as soon as I realized what was happening, I stopped sleeping with him. I haven't been with a man for a long time. She put down her glass and gave me a long, appraising look. You know, you're a pretty nice guy. How would you like to end the girl's long drought? With that, she quickly slid off the couch onto her knees, moved towards me, and, to my surprise, began fiddling with my zipper. No, wait, Mrs. Fisher. I would really like to, but I'm happily married. And then I stopped short. I was no longer a happily married man. In fact, I was planning on staying single altogether for the near future. The idea of getting a little revenge on my wife and lover even after his death seemed damn attractive. And since I also hadn't had sex for quite a long time, I suddenly felt damn excited. I stopped resisting. After she unzipped, she reached for my manhood and got to work. Soon my excitement increased so much that I began to moan, heading towards a powerful climax. But she pulled back and shook her finger at me. No, 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 she said with a dirty smile on her lips. I want my share too. She tugged at my belt buckle, and when it gave way, I was left without pants. Then she took off her clothes. Looking at her legs and hips, I realized that although the blooms may have faded a little, those long stems were still in great shape, and the aroma emanating from the petals provoked them to be picked. Come on, baby, she cooed. Oh God, how I need this, she exclaimed, pulled me and her fingers dug into my back. I felt the same way. I haven't had sex for a long time, too long, I realized. And this woman knew what she was doing. For not being the youngest girl, she had a lot of energy. I was in heaven and knew I wouldn't last long. I usually pride myself on my self-control. I like to bring my partner to completion before I allow myself to lose my temper. But it was so long ago that I wasn't sure I could hold back. So I did everything to help her. And with her, we both soared to a climax that must have rattled in the windows. Leaning back on the sofa, I hoped that the neighbors did not hear us. Otherwise, they might call the police and report another murder. After a couple of minutes, Mrs. Fisher leaned back and looked at me with grateful eyes. Oh, baby, that was so good. I didn't realize how much I missed it. I looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. She reached over and grabbed a couple of cocktail napkins. We got ourselves in order. She stood up and poured herself another drink. Do you want it right now? She asked. No, I said. I need to go back to the station. She looked at me lazily. It was a lot of fun, she said. We have to do this again? Hey, what did you say your name was? I was already starting to get nervous. I didn't say so, I said, heading towards the door. Oh, she said lightheartedly. Well, call me anyway. With that, I slipped out the door and hurried to my car. As I pulled away, I felt satisfied with the unexpected interlude I was enjoying, but my mood quickly darkened as I thought about everything she had said to me before she jumped on me. If Dr. Fisher really was such a lover of married women, he could well have become the victim of a jealous husband. This seemed like a promising line of investigation. There might be a few guys out there with a motive. But how the hell am I going to investigate them if I don't know who the doctor's other lovers are? For that matter, the more potential suspects there are, the harder it will be for me to narrow down the list. Then I thought about Mrs. Fisher. While I found her to be an experienced and enthusiastic lover, I couldn't help but wonder if she might also be a cold-blooded killer. If she saw an email invitation for her husband to come to the motel, she could wait until Billy and I left and then sneak inside and take revenge. This way, she can inherit her husband's property while we are accused. I had to admit, it was pretty clever, if she really was a killer. But if she killed her husband, Why would she tell the detective about her motives? It seemed like a really stupid thing to do. But what if she's more cunning than she seems? What if she intentionally revealed the prenuptial agreement to throw me off the scent? For that matter, was she really just a horny widow? Or was she screwing me to distract me? The more I thought about everything, the more my head began to hurt. Thank God it's time to meet Billy. I needed to discuss everything with someone. Over a cold glass, I told Billy what I had learned from Mrs. Fisher. My problem, I told him, is that now I have more potential suspects, and I don't know what to do with them. How will I ever find the real killer? Well, Billy opined, if you knew who it was, I bet you could make a lot of money. I looked at him in confusion. What are you talking about, Billy? It's very simple, he said. I bet the real killer will pay you almost everything so that you don't give him up to the police. This is blackmail, Billy. We have enough problems without being accused of blackmail. Oh, well, yes. But instead of getting angry at Billy, I started thinking about his proposal. Wait a minute, I said. Maybe this isn't such a bad idea. I once saw this on TV. All we have to do is make it clear that we know who did this dirty deed and that we need money to keep quiet about it. And then, when someone shows up to make the deal, we'll catch the real killer. Wow, that's very smart, Johnny, Billy said. Then his smile disappeared. But how are you going to report this killer if you don't even know who he is? I think I know a way, I said smugly. How did the killer even know that we would meet Dr. Fisher at the motel? As far as I'm concerned, he, or she, I said, thinking of Mrs. Fisher, must have seen the fake letter I sent from Doris's address. So we'll just send out another one the same way and see who takes the bait. But how will Dr. Fisher get the letter, Johnny? He is dead. I sighed. I know Dr. Fisher is dead, Billy, but his killer is alive, and he's the one we need. He will see the new letter as well as the old one, and when he appears, we will seize him. You're a genius, Billy praised me, and this time I had to agree with him. I decided to put my plan into action immediately. On my way home from the bar, I stopped at an ATM to get some cash. Then I went to a motel and rented a room for 2 days. The receptionist was a bored teenager who was so engrossed in watching TV that he barely looked at me. On a whim, I decided to ask for number 101 again. The killer will flinch when he sees this. I chuckled to myself. The next morning, I got up very early so I could send a message from Doris's address before she woke up. I spent quite a lot of time writing it, and I was very proud of my work. I know who you are and what you did with that slut, Fisher. If you don't want me to go to the police, you better come to the same room in the same motel where Dr. Fisher died. Be there tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and bring $20,000 in cash with you. Otherwise, this should be enough, I thought. I clicked send and then deleted the sent message from Doris's computer, just like last time. The trap is set, I told myself. Now let's see who bites. I went to work as always, but it was hard for me to concentrate. I kept wondering who would show up in the motel room tomorrow. I realized that I might not even know this person, especially if he was one of the angry husbands. By the time I finished work and went to the bar, I was dying to talk it over with Billy and see his reaction. But Billy wasn't there, and although I waited almost an hour, he never showed up. This made me really nervous. Billy was always ready to drink beer. What could happen to him? As I drove home, my paranoia continued to grow. What if Billy was taken by the police? What if he told them everything we did? What if they are waiting at my house to arrest me? I was so consumed by my fears that I made it home before I even knew where I was. Fortunately, no one was waiting for me there. Even Doris had not yet returned home. Just a few minutes later, I heard Doris drive up, and by the time she entered the house, I was already her loving husband. But it didn't really matter what I looked like because she was hyped up. "You'll never guess what happened today," she said excitedly. "Your friend Billy is hiding from the law." I thought my heart would stop, but Doris didn't even notice. He and Phyllis had a big fight and he gave her a black eye. She called the police and he drove off in an unknown direction. Oh God, I thought. If they catch him, and start asking about Dr. Fisher, we're screwed. But Doris continued to chatter about the situation and did not notice my panic. To hide my emotions, I pretended to be interested in what she was talking about. And anyway, why did they quarrel? I asked when I had the opportunity to insert a word. The girls at the gym told me that Billy thinks Phyllis is cheating on him, she said, and I mentally shook my head in confusion. Are there really no more faithful wives left? I was surprised. This thought reignited my anger at Doris, and I said angrily, well, if she cheated, then it serves her right. I thought Doris would attack me for that little remark, but she didn't respond. This only made me angrier. What hypocrisy, I thought. You're the worst liar I know, but if I raised a finger on you, you'd fucking scream. But for now, I kept my thoughts to myself. I said nothing more to Doris at dinner and then went into the study to think over recent events. Suddenly, a terrifying thought came to me. What if Billy is the killer? I remembered the folding knife he had with him when we tied up the doctor. What if Billy sneaked back and killed the doctor after we left the motel because Phyllis cheated on him? I didn't want to believe it, but it all made some terrible sense. Then an even more terrible thought occurred to me. What if Billy decides to show up at the motel tomorrow? I'm bigger than him, but I'm not sure I can beat him in a fight, especially if he brings a knife. I decided it would be better to take extra protection with me, so I went down to the basement and took out my pistol. I haven't fired it in a while, but it seems to be fine. The next morning I went to work as usual, except I had a gun in the car. After lunch, I told the manager that I needed to rest for the rest of the day. He didn't like it, but I'm one of his best salesmen, so there wasn't much he could do. I left the dealership and arrived at the motel half an hour early. Putting the pistol in my jacket pocket, I walked into the room and opened the door with my card. I almost locked the door behind me, but at the last minute, I remembered that I wanted the killer to be able to enter, and I secured the door with a latch. Then I settled into a chair and prepared to wait. Sitting there, I looked around the room. It was obvious that they had installed new carpet. Even the chair I was sitting on looked new, so I decided that it had to be changed too. Otherwise, everything looked the same as last time. This didn't make me feel any better. I didn't want to think about it anymore, so I started thinking through a list of suspects. The first was Mrs. Fisher. She had a huge motive, but I had a hard time believing it was her. After all, she had put up with so much from her husband for so long. It's hard to understand why she suddenly decided to do something so drastic. Yet she may have reached her limit. And don't forget, I told myself, that she was the one most likely to have access to Dr. Fisher's email. Then came the husbands of other women who were Dr. Fisher's mistresses. I didn't know who they were or how many there might be, but one of them might be a violent type. Perhaps he was stalking the doctor, waiting for the right moment. How he could have accessed the doctor's email I didn't know, but if he did, he could understand that we had given him the perfect opportunity to take revenge. Then I thought about Billy. I hoped with all my heart it wasn't him, but I had to admit he was a good suspect. I knew he had a short temper, and to be honest, there was something mean about him too. I never thought Billy could fool me, but maybe he was smarter than I thought. It seemed unlikely, but I couldn't rule it out. At that moment, I heard a sound in the corridor and grabbed the gun. The door creaked open, and dim light from the corridor leaked into the room. Then, to my amazement, I heard a voice calling, "Johnny? Johnny? Are you here?" "Doris!" I exclaimed in surprise. "What are you doing here?" I reached over, turned on the light, and watched as my loving wife walked into the room, shaking her head in disgust. "I'm here to stop you from doing something really stupid, Johnny." "But how did you know that I would be here?" I asked in confusion. She crossed her arms over her chest and started lecturing me in that schoolteacher tone that I hate. "When I woke up yesterday morning, it was obvious that you were messing with my laptop. I checked my email and didn't find anything at first, but when I checked my deleted items, I saw your stupid email." Crap, I should have thought about this. "There are a lot of things you should have thought about," she said angrily. "Maybe if you hadn't dropped out of college." Don't you dare offend me again, I barked angrily. Besides, I'm the one who has the right to be upset, not you. You cheated on me with your damn doctor friend. I caught you, and now I'm going to divorce your ass. She made a gesture with her hand as if she was shooing away a fly. It doesn't matter now. What matters is what you do here. What exactly were you hoping to do with that ridiculous email you sent from my account? I was offended by her reaction to the accusation of cheating, but I felt like I had to defend myself. So I began to explain how Billy and I had lured Dr. Fisher here to disgrace him, and then found out that he had been killed. We were afraid that the police would think we did it, I told her. So I started looking for the real killer. I told her how I had pretended to be a detective to interrogate Mrs. Fisher, and how I had come up with the idea of luring the real murderer here by pretending to be a blackmailer. Doris continued to sigh as she listened. Finally, she raised her hand to stop me. Johnny, do you know Alexander Pope? No, I said, shaking my head. I don't think I've ever met him. She rolled her eyes. Mr. the Pope once said, "A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Drink deeply, or do not partake of the Pierian spring." What kind of Persian spring is this? What are you talking about, Doris? It's okay, Johnny. You won't understand, she said, shaking her head in disgust. She took a deep breath and put her hands on her hips, and I knew that now it would begin. You've never been the brightest light, but this plan has to be the dimmest, dumbest thing I've ever heard. First of all, Fisher is dead. Why would anyone check a dead man's mailbox? Why would they even have access to it? Well, they could, I said defensively. Anyway, I bet Mrs. Fisher had access to it. So lush? Doris chuckled. It's already hard for her to find her way to a bottle of whiskey, let alone get into her husband's email. Well, none of that matters anyway, I argued hotly, because I think the real killer got the message after all. And who is this, pray tell? She asked sarcastically. As much as I hate to admit it, I think Billy was the real killer. I think he found out that Dr. Fisher was patting Phyllis on the ass. After he and I left Dr. Fisher here in the room, I think he came back and cut Fisher's throat. So I bet Billy is about to walk through that door, and that's why you need to get the hell out of here, right now. Doris reached into her purse, pulled out a pair of surgical gloves, and began to pull them on. I knew she always carried them with her because of her job at a pharmaceutical company, but I couldn't understand why she needed them now. Then she looked at me. I'm sure Billy won't be walking through that door anytime soon because the police arrested him today. This idiot went to the same bar where you hang out all the time, and the police were waiting for him there. Oh, wow. I was shocked. Here I perked up. But maybe this means he'll confess to the police and get me off the hook, I added hopefully. Doris looked at me calmly. Is this the same gun you keep in the basement? She asked. Yes, I said, taken by surprise. Can I take a look? She asked, holding out her hand. Of course, I said, handing it to her. She examined it carefully, making sure it was loaded and cocked. Then she looked at me. Despite your theory, I don't think you need to worry about what Billy will tell the police. Why not? I asked. Because Billy didn't kill Morris Fisher. How did you know that? It's simple. Because I killed him. You. Why would you kill him? You were in love with him, I almost screamed. That's it, she said bitterly. I really loved him, and he said he loved me too. He promised to take me away from you and your stupid friends. He was going to marry me and show me all the wonderful things in life. But then I found out that he was sleeping with Phyllis, and that he had no intention of marrying me. She began pacing back and forth, waving the pistol to emphasize her words. I didn't know what to do until I heard your phone conversation with Billy about renting a motel room. When I found your first letter, it was quite easy for me to figure out your ridiculous plan to humiliate Morris. At first I wanted to warn him, but then I realized that you gave me the opportunity to get rid of both of you. So I waited until you and Billy left, and then I slipped into the room. Morris was so happy to see me that he almost cried. But when I told him that I found out about Phyllis, I saw fear in his eyes. When I pulled out one of his own scalpels, he began to beg. And then he tried to scream when I carved the word slut into his chest. But you can't scream loudly through the duct tape. When I finished marking him for the world to see who he was, I yanked his head back and cut his jugular vein and carotid artery with one blow. Even with all the details, her story still didn't make sense to me. I can't believe you're capable of doing this, I protested. Besides, you cried and cried that evening when his death was announced on TV. Don't you still understand that women can cry on demand when they need it? She asked with a grin. Then her eyes darkened. Have you ever read that hell hath no fury like a jilted woman? Oh wait, of course you didn't, since the only thing you read is the sports page. She stopped abruptly and pointed the gun at me. But for some reason those idiots from the police didn't put you in jail for murdering Fisher. And despite all your clumsiness, you came too close to the truth for me to let you live. So I'm afraid I'll have to make it look like suicide out of remorse in the same room where Morris died. I like symmetry, she added with a grin. It's almost poetic. I had never seen Doris like this, and it was quite a scary sight. Who would have thought that she could turn into a cold-blooded killer? And why, oh why, did I give her my gun? What an idiotic move. I had to try to talk her out of it. Wait a minute, Doris, I cried desperately. You can't do this. One of the people who received the letter I sent could walk through that door any minute. She laughed in my face. Here's a perfect example of why I should do this. You're deadly stupid. Rest assured, Johnny, no one saw your ridiculous letter, and no one is coming to save your stupid ass. That's where you're wrong, said a voice from the door. Drop the gun, or you're dead. Doris turned around in surprise and saw Detective Monica Ferguson walking in with her gun drawn. Right behind her stood a uniformed policeman, also with a gun. Doris hesitated, then dropped the gun with a curse, and all strength seemed to leave her. She fell to her knees and began to sob. This time, it seemed to me, for real. Detective Ferguson looked over her shoulder at the officer and said, "Take the gun and put on the handcuffs." The cop walked over and kicked the gun away, then quickly cuffed Doris by placing her hands behind her back. Only after he finished did Monica relax and take a deep breath. As for me, I was ready to collapse with relief. "Thank God you are here," I muttered. "Another minute or two and I would have been dead." Then I looked at her in sudden confusion. "Wait a minute. Why are you even here?" Monica smiled at me. "We've had access to the late doctor's email since he was killed. This morning I happened to look into his mailbox and noticed that he had received a new letter. I didn't know what to think when I read the message, but I definitely wanted to be there to see what would happen." I turned to Doris. "Well, I guess my little plan wasn't so stupid," I teased her. She looked at me angrily but didn't say anything. The policeman lifted Doris to her feet and led her to the police car. Monica and I followed her, and as we walked, what she said came to me. "If you had access to Dr. Fisher's email, how did you not find out about his affair with Doris?" Monica shook her head. "We didn't find out anything because Dr. Fisher was very secretive. Apparently he had a habit of erasing everything that came into the mailbox as soon as he read it. Maybe he was afraid that his wife would find out." Like she cares, I thought, remembering our little meeting. But I kept it to myself. There was no point in muddying the waters, I decided. As the officer secured Doris in the back seat, I began to think about the future. "So, what will happen to me now?" I asked Monica. She patted my arm reassuringly and smiled wryly. "Well, that's up to the district attorney, of course, but I bet he won't even bring any charges against you. Dr. Fisher is dead, and now we know who really killed him. Under these circumstances, I doubt we can get the angry husband convicted of assault." "Well, no matter what happened," I said, "if it weren't for you, I would already be dead. If there is anything I can do to repay you, just let me know." She gave me a long, slow look from head to toe, and then gave me a big smile. "When this is all over, Maybe I'll have to stop by the car dealership where you work and see you. I was looking for something new, something that would bring a little excitement into my life. Maybe you can help me with this." Then she winked at me. And you don't have to be a Nobel Prize winner to understand what that means. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.